What just happened at Biscuit Basin in Yellowstone National Park? Well, this is a classic example of a hydrothermal explosion. Not a volcanic eruption. This was not triggered by volcanic activity. If it were, we would have seen many different changes. Lots of seismicity, ground deformation, gas and thermal emissions. Instead, this was caused by water flashing to steam in a confined space under Black Diamond Pool. When that happened, kaboom! The area could not contain the pressure anymore, and there was a huge explosion. This sent steam and fragments of rock and mud several hundred feet into the air. That dark color of that explosion is from all of that debris that's mixed in with the hot water and steam. Some of the rocks that fell out were 3 feet across, weighed hundreds of pounds, and grapefruit-sized pieces of rock landed 100 feet away. At the time, there were no injuries reported from this event. Most of the debris was directed towards the Firehole River, and the largest rocks fell in that direction. Now, since that time, in the afternoon, right after the explosion, there were some 8-foot-high hot water eruptions from Black Diamond Pool, but by this morning, the pool was relatively calm, and both Black Diamond and Opal had risen to a level that they were overflowing and sending murky water into the Firehole River. Now, despite how spectacular, dramatic, and hazardous these events were, it was a relatively small event in Yellowstone. Hydrothermal explosions in Yellowstone can be huge, leaving craters hundreds of feet across. The largest known hydrothermal explosion event in the world occurred in Yellowstone, Mary Bay, on the north side of Yellowstone Lake. It left a crater 1.5 miles across. Smaller events tend to happen about once or twice, maybe even 3 times a year in Yellowstone National Park, often in the backcountry, so they may escape immediate notice. We detected one just back in April 15th of this year, based on monitoring instruments in the Norris Geyser Basin. But Pork Chop Geyser in 1989, that was a very famous one. Some of the ones that were large, that kind of approximated the size of the one we had on July 23rd, were Excelsior Geyser back in the late 1880s. So there have been a lot of explosions in Yellowstone National Park. It's a consequence of all that hot water moving around in the subsurface. Now, over the next few days and weeks, geologists from the National Park Service, the USGS, and collaborating institutions are going to be looking at the fallout deposit and sampling the waters, making observations, trying to understand what might have changed beneath Biscuit Basin. That might help us better understand the hazards going forward, because clearly there are some big changes that this explosion brought to the area. Hydrothermal explosion hazards are really one of the most underappreciated hazards in the Yellowstone region. Perhaps as a result of the July 23rd activity, they won't be underappreciated anymore.